got a song to sing, I got a story to tell, I got some words to write, I hope they find you well. I got a song to sing, I got a story to tell, I got some words to write, I hope they find you well.
I'm Anthony Bain, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Charley Boorman, a motorcycle enthusiast, adventurer, and UK Master Chef. So thank you so much for being here, Charley.
I like throwing the old UK Master Chef in. Yeah, that was that was probably more stressful than riding electric bikes up through South America.
It's just wonderful to have you back on your latest adventure, but I know that the road back has had its obstacles. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. No, listen, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. I had a huge accident in 2016 where I got clipped by a car in Portugal, and I ended up rapidly hitting a wall with my legs and kind of destroyed them. And it took a good 2 years before I could really walk again properly. And then I finally sort of got back on a bike, and then I promptly fell off a motorbike in the middle of South Africa and completely smashed myself up again. So on the first accident, I dislocated my right ankle really badly and smashed my left tibia and fibia really badly, and had to have one of those big cages around my left leg to put it all back together again. And anyway, and then I broke my hand. So I had sort of 3 limbs at the time. And I remember kind of waking up the next morning in hospital, having been through surgery and all that kind of stuff. And it was all a bit of a blur. And I remember those awful moments when you realize that you've broken something. I remember I fell off a motorbike, and if you're a motorcycle rider, if you fall off your bike, your first thought is to jump back up again, pick up the bike and get on the bike before anybody's noticed that you've fallen. And you go, no, I haven't fallen. No. And, but I remember getting up, and I remember going to walk to my bike, and I remember looking down, and my left leg was just sort of flopping all over the place and was pretty awful. Anyway, so I woke up in the morning and I looked at myself and I thought, my God, this is bad. I mean, I'm in big trouble. 3 limbs out of 4 are out of action and stuff. And I was starting to feel really sorry for myself. And I was just thinking, gosh, if I'd only just left the hotel, 5 minutes earlier or 2 minutes later or whatever, this would never have happened. And then then at that point I noticed there was someone else in the room, and there was another person in the bed beside me, and he was in a terrible state. I mean, really bad. And I looked at him, and I looked at myself, and I looked down at myself, and I became quite cheery about my injuries. And I'm thinking, well, actually, that's not so bad, And I think at that point I kind of realized that, as the surgeon said, look, I'm just a glorified carpenter. All I've done is put you back together, and the rest is up to you. And from that point on, I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to get back on a bike. I'm going to use that as my therapy, as my goal, and that's what I did. And then I fell off again, and then really smashed myself up, even worse than the first time. So it was quite difficult, and that stopped my career. Up until that point, I was making a TV show every year. I did race to Dakar. I did Extreme Frontiers by any means, traveled all over the world doing extreme stuff and all that kind of stuff. And it stopped. And you, at that stage, you and I had kind of had left for America just after Long Way Down. And I was living in London, and he was working, I was working. We kept missing each other, and didn't, when he was over here, I was somewhere else, and that kind of thing. And then because I'd had all these injuries, I was stuck at home, and he came to London to make a movie and came and stayed for a week, was turned into a month. And then we just started talking about motorbikes and about, doing this third one that we'd always spoken about. I think, 2004, when we did Long Way Around, the first one from London to New York through Siberia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Siberia, Far East Russia, and then we went over to Canada and then America. And that was incredible, because it was the first trip that we'd ever done. Part of it, of course, is getting on the bikes and riding bikes and that travel and there's a wonderful sort of it's one of, you put your helmet on, and then for a number of hours in a day you can sit there and your mind wanders and thoughts. So it's very sort of self-healing or I can't think of the word, but it's good therapy for you. and then the other side of it is that you're meeting people all the time. You're relying on people's hospitality and friendship and kindness to be able to carry on in your journey, and through that you meet the most extraordinary people. And so it's not so much about the A to B. It's sort of everything that happens sort of in between. And it's funny how the difficulties or the breakdowns or the funny things that happen, those are the things that you remember. On the days that things went relatively smoothly, you don't really remember those days so much, really, when you've come back. And we remember in going into some place, and we were trying to hook our bikes in this town, and there was for once there was quite a decent looking place to eat some food. We thought, oh, we'll go there, we'll have a banging meal and charge the bikes at the same time. And then we said we plugged in, and then of course the whole hotel just plunged into darkness. And then we tried again and plunged it into darkness again, and then tried again, and then plunged the kitchen into darkness. And eventually they said, "Look, I'm really sorry." And it was as if it was their fault that we couldn't, that they couldn't sort it out. But what happened then was that we ended up then going to a campsite, because campsites always have power. So we thought, well, we'll plug into a campsite, grab some food, and we'll do that. And I think it was in episode 3 or 4, I can't remember, but we ended up meeting this lovely couple who met. And fell in love with each other, and then he had to move on, and she was left she lived just outside Istanbul. She was a school teacher, and she couldn't get him out of her mind. Anyway, he came back for her, and she told her father that she was going to Istanbul to teach in Istanbul, and she went and told her mother that as well. She went to Istanbul, met up with him, and we were talking to her in South America, and they'd been there for months, and they were completely in love with each other. And we said, "Oh, have you told your father since?" And she said, "No, she hadn't." And so I was watching the show and Ewan said, and we were both talking about it, and he said, "Oh, Charlie, gosh, I tell you, well, if her father didn't know then, he might well know now." So. But so those are the people that you meet, and that's what makes the journeys of all the people that you meet along the way, and the kindness of and amazing the generosity of people. And what's interesting is that Europe and North America and stuff, we all have a bit of a tendency to sort of look down at these other countries, because culturally and all this stuff, they do things in a different way, or have different expectations and different ways of life, and there's a tendency to sort of say, well, this is the best life, you should all be like that, and actually, in fact, that's not true at all. People in all these different countries are wonderful and have great culture and have great things going on there, and we shouldn't be judgmental about how other people live, and just let people live how they live, and accept it. And the best thing is to what you and I do, and what thousands of other people do, is get out there on bicycles and trains and buses and whatever form of transport, on a motorbike, and go out and experience it, because most of the world is a good place with good people.
Well, it's wonderful to have this document of such a great journey. I look forward to seeing the rest. And I can't help but ask, I know we're just now getting into this journey, but any ideas for what's next?
Well, it's always funny, every trip has its lifespan, and as you get towards the end of doing one of these big trips, you start to want to come home and start to want to see your family and friends and get back to your home and stuff like that. But then another part of you, if someone said, "Oh, look, come on, let's just carry on," you would, So it is quite difficult to stop. But I suppose by talking about doing another one, just as you're finishing one, means you can sort of finish the one that you're on, knowing that you're going to do another one. And so Ewan and I have definitely spoken about it. One of the ones we spoke about was sort of long way Scandinavia, or up through Norway, Sweden, and all that kind of way. Or the other one would be long way down under. That could be fun.
Absolutely.
So who knows? Who knows? I mean, we've got to get people to watch this one first, so that we can get some enthusiasm going out of people, and maybe they'll want another one.
Absolutely. I know I'm going to be watching wherever the road takes you. And thank you so much for being here.
A pleasure. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.